Hi, Aries. You had the pleasure of interviewing a ton of recruiters within the industry, and we created 8 habits of an effective recruiter blog. And this gives you guys insights on what it takes to be a really good recruiter in 2024. There's a lot of different topics that people took. Um, they all were asked the same exact questions, and they had a lot of different perspectives that sometimes were the same and sometimes were different. And I have the pleasure of bringing Heather Colvin on today to give you a glimpse of her passion, her career as has evolved, and what she has done to be one of the effective recruiters within her space right now. She has over 31,000 followers on LinkedIn. So if you haven't followed her, you haven't connected with her, please do that now. She has a wealth of knowledge. She is the senior technical recruiter at Smart Data and has a lot of different experiences within her career to really elevate this community. And I'm so happy that she was willing to jump on the phone call right now to just tell her story and some of the tidbits of how she became a really good recruiter. So, without further ado, Heather, welcome to the webinar.
Yeah, it's an honor and pleasure to be here to just be able to dive in and into what's built me over the years. I think for a lot of times when we join these spaces, a lot of the people that come on board have been doing it for decades, and they just have seen it all. I have been doing this for about 5 years, so I haven't seen it all. I'm still kind of building and growing myself, and I think that's an important story too, because I think there's a lot of us out there that aren't decades in. And it's like, how do you build yourself in those early stages? And who are those folks doing that? And what are they doing that's giving them leverage? And so, yeah, I'm excited to dive into this conversation and kind of share what I've learned. I do want to highlight that any advice or just feedback that I give here is all tailored around tech recruiting. I think that's an important note to have, simply because it's a little different style of recruiting than other things. It has a little bit more nuances to it. And so a lot of the things that I'll share are going to be related to how to be successful as a tech recruiter.
One of the things that you highlight in the blog is the continuous learning portion of it. How do you stay up to date on the latest trends, tools, recruitment, technologies, and how has continuous learning impacted your career as a recruiter 5 years in? In that 5 years, I'm sure it's changed drastically, and you kind of have to pivot and learning what's new, what's next. But walk us through that experience on that continuous learning.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the very beginning of my career, I had no resources, no tools, and really not, I wasn't surrounded by a community like I am today that could help me guide me towards, here's a YouTube video, here's an article. I was doing all that myself. And so, the first step into really building out how my roadmap works in my mind when it comes to the architectural design of applications and understanding all the layers is I started with webinars or on Eventbrite. And so that's really what got me in the flow. And like you said, in the pivot aspect of things. So as you develop knowledge, you're going to continuously pivot because your knowledge changes. You understand more of the defined processes, more of the why. And so you're going to go from basic understandings to more moderate understanding to advanced, expert, however that looks. And so one of the first things that I learned as a tech recruiter that I really felt helped change the landscape of what I was looking for is just understanding the differences between a microservice and a monolithic architectural design. And I learned that on a webinar through Eventbrite. And that changed my approach on just identifying the developer that I needed based on the type of architectural environment they were supporting. And that was just a basic layer. So that got me excited to like, now what more do I not know and what more can I learn so I can ask better questions and better qualifying questions, help support my clients better and things like that. And so, but in the advancement of my skills and my value in building my community, especially on LinkedIn, you then get access to resources like we're doing right now, like knowing that HireEasy has webinars that you can go back and listen to and build skill. All those things were just not something I was aware of in the beginning. And so the people in your community will help guide and direct you on those continuous learning paths. Even around, let's say, an example, if you want to gain free certifications, you can go to Coursera or AWS if you want to get that technical into your skills as a tech recruiter. And so, yeah, that's continuous learning aspect. You're going to do it your whole career. But that was kind of how my foundation started and how it uplifted from there.
I think there's a turning point between good to great recruiters, and it might be with anything, is the aha moment of this is going to be my career versus my job, and I'm going to build my craft day in and day out and get better with little different tidbits and trying to educate yourself on a continuous basis and practice and practice and practice your craft daily. So when that time does come, you can practice what you've learned into application. But at the end of the day, like you said, you hit home on relationships, and we're a people business, and we need to keep people business at the forefront. What strategies do you use to build strong, lasting relationships with maybe hiring managers internally, or surrounding yourself with those mentors and those individuals so you can continue learning from the people around you?
Yeah, so I'll start with building relationships with mentors and leaders and such. And so I learned very early in my career that to attract people to want to connect with you, you have to have a value to exchange. And so very early, I really focused on learning as much as I could. So when I got into conversation, I wasn't just a listener. I was someone that could contribute. And when I turned into a contributor, that's when people wanted to build connection with me. They wanted to hear more of what Heather had to say. And so, but at first, it wasn't that way because I had to build the skill. I'm 5 years in, I did a career pivot. So it took a lot of learning in the beginning to build that value exchange. So once I had it, that's when I was able to connect with mentors and leaders and then gain even more information. Because another thing I learned early on is the information you receive is only as good as the questions that you ask. So I also became really good at asking great questions. And that curiosity too led people to want to connect with me because they realized Heather's doing something and I want to be a part of it. And so, and that same type of approach is what's helped me with hiring managers and building those relationships because I'm highly curious. I built skill to where I'm not just a listener when we're in our discovery calls. I'm adding value. I'm sharing with them that I understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and wanting to get it really in the weeds of their problem and just kind of how I can go out there and find the right talent that's going to be able to create those solutions. So that confidence, both with my mentors, leaders, or just the community itself, because of my value, transcends over to hiring managers as well. And that's how I've been able to not only build relationships, but also maintain a strong network as well.
Let's flip it over on maybe the external relationships that you're building within the industry. You had a quote within this blog. It said, if you're going to be in the space for 10 to 15 years, those candidates are going to be around too. In 10 years, you might have an opportunity for them. But if you didn't keep a log or database, you might remember uh, who they are, but you don't remember their last name or how to contact them. How do you, what strategies do you do to rediscover candidates within your database and or different tools resources to remember individuals? Maybe you don't have an opportunity for them now, but in the future, and how are they going to remember you?
Yes. So great question. So I'm going to start with how I'm able to first start the process of building out that that community of candidates. And so on LinkedIn, you can only have 30,000 first connections. I've become really intentional about who I say yes to in my connections, and a lot of that is talent because I want to have the ability to reach them directly if and when I have an opportunity that could be important, something that they would be interested in because I'm an agency style recruiter. And but outside of that, because that can get overwhelming, right? You got thousands of people now in your LinkedIn, especially if you're going to be doing this for 10 or 15 years. And so I'm an Excel nerd. I love Excel. I love Google Sheet. You can do so, especially Google Sheet since it's live and you can access it anywhere. So I love getting on there. I love that it has check boxes. So I use the check boxes religiously. And so I have a database where I have their name, and I have in the check boxes all the different tech frameworks and languages and what they specialize in. And I organize all that so then I can filter it when I need to find a specific talent for a client that I'm looking for. And so that way I can figure out, their location. Are they remote? Just anything that's important for me to know later is housed in that spreadsheet. So then I'm able to not only find the talent, but find talent that would be interested. And so that's kind of how I built that, and then like maintain it for the long haul. But you got to start early, because last thing you want to do is have to go back and and build it out later. But there was another part to your question. I answered one piece. I don't think I answered the second. So I don't know if you remember that, but at least from the building the community side, with the candidates, that's how I do it when it comes to logging. So,
Um, Utilizing LinkedIn, you said, "Hey, I'm very specific on who I connect with."
mhm.
Have your framework changed of majority of the contacts that you have, connections that you have are candidates in your space that you're trying to recruit and source, or is it individuals within like other recruiting professionals to learn from them, or a little bit of both? How do you determine whether you connect with an individual or not?
So it's a mix of both, but then there's one piece, that's important to me too. When I started to build on LinkedIn, I'm a faith-based person, so I just said grow my network to where others can use me as a vessel to get access to opportunities. And so one of the things that I tell candidates that I choose to connect with is that one benefit to connecting with me as a first connection, if they would choose to. Not everyone wants to connect with recruiters. I always identify that so they don't feel obligated to accept. Is that if there's a job posted and there's a job poster attached to it, it'll tell you if you have any mutual connections to that person. If I'm a mutual connection, reach out to me and say, "Hey, Heather, I applied to Jessica's role at this company. Can you let her know my resume's in her database?" And I'll ping Jessica and do a warm introduction, or say, "Can talk to this person? They're great. Highly recommend, pull on their resume." And that's kind of how you get filtered through the noise. So that was like the main piece of me wanting to build that out. But with that, I was like wanting to focus on that. Now I can't remember your
No,
your
you're good.
question.
Of like how you determine if you're going to connect with somebody or not.
Oh yes, yes. So the way I determine if I'm going to connect with them is just, is this someone that I'm going to be able to provide value for at any
Sure.
point, right? Whether I can connect them to opportunities, or I'll connect with hiring managers. I'll connect with other leaders in our space. And when I say hiring managers, not necessarily hiring managers of clients I can support, but hiring managers for me. You never know when I'll need opportunity. And so if I'm ever, that's actually how I landed in the role I'm in now. I needed opportunity, and because I was already connected, my open to work banner hit their feed, and I got the job. And I had other interviews too from that, and it was all from first connections. It wasn't because someone that was a second or third. My first connection saw Heather's open. Let's grab her. And so I build for the intention to help others, and then also if I ever need help as well.
Going back to the habit of documentation and documenting everything, you have all this information on candidates, but how you apply it is the other aspect of it. Can you share maybe an example of how data-driven sourcing has improved your recruitment strategies and led to maybe better hires, or how it's made you become a better recruiter, documentation and utilizing data to predict future results?
Yeah. So of course, speed, accuracy. Whenever I'm able to dock them into a spreadsheet and easily filter to find talent. And what I do as an agency recruiter, it's all about, not only is it about quality, but it's about speed. And so sometimes even when you're a firm that focuses on quality, you could still be partnered with an organization that has another firm that focuses just on speed, and they get lucky. They sometimes they throw it and see if it sticks, and it does. And while you're sitting there focused on quality, and so to make sure that the quality doesn't get sacrificed with the speed, having that documentation in a spreadsheet, or utilizing like LinkedIn Recruiter has notes, or we use Hire Easy. And so Hire Easy has a way that I can leave notes and things like that. So it's important to leave those little just kind of signature roadmaps of the information, like this person's really great at this person's really great at that. So that those notes, so then when you need to hire and you need to hire fast, that you're able to go grab that information or at least see it. So let's say I'm doing a search and I'm not going through my spreadsheet and I'm doing an active LinkedIn recruiter search. I have the notes section if I've talked to them before, or I have in my notes other channels of communication. So they opened my email through Hire Easy. The phone number through Hire Easy got us connected. So then I'm able to remember the channel of communication that worked best to get a hold of this person. So then I can make sure that I get a hold of them to see if they're interested in the opportunity that I have. So
With the AI technology right now and automation and campaigns and outreaches and stuff like that, how do you personalize that outreach based on that documentation and the information and data that you have on an individual? And what sets you apart from every other recruiter that reaches out to a candidate? How do you get such good response rates? And how do you personalize that to each person?
yeah, so I mean, I'll do a quick overview if the profile's filled out and they decided to do some type of attention to detail. Like an example, I reached out to a candidate who had Data Ninja on their profile. So when I did like the subject line, I was like, we're hiring a software engineer, aka a data ninja. Like some I do little things like that, but really I just keep it basic. So when I was early in my career, I would go to networking events and talk to talent that I would, eventually would want to help land somewhere if I had a client looking. And I would show them my outreach and say, would you respond to this? Or what would you respond to if not? And that really helped me understand like what they really care about. And so what I had found is they just short, sweet, to the point, and so because they're going to know right away, is this even something I would entertain? And as an agency recruiter, I can't be upfront, right away about who I'm supporting. And so I have to, kind of get a little creative there. But the other piece that's really helped me outside of my messaging and keeping it clear, concise, and I only get personal if they're personal. Because not all LinkedIn profiles are personal. Some of them are plain and boring. They have nothing on them. And so I'm not going to sit there and be like, your experience really blew me away, and they have no experience on their profile. It's like there's nothing there. Nothing blew me away because I don't know. I'll say like, hey, you're open to work, but your profile is blank. I'd love to figure out what you've been doing the last few years and see if anything that I have makes sense to you. If it's something you'd explore.
You
Um,
hit the nail on the
so
head when you're saying that because the typical, I think, pitfall some recruiters have is the messaging. You'd be great for this role. You'd be awesome when you have no idea who they are. You never had a conversation with them, and you're just sending that message to a million different people. Uh,
mhm.
the thing that I saw was, and I had success with, is talk to candidates about opportunities versus the specific role that you're trying to fill. You'll get a better response rate because it's understanding what they want, what they need, and what's going to make them move the position to their full-time job to over to your organization.
Yeah,
And switching that mindset of I need to fill this rec versus understanding what they want and where they can go within the organization, you're going to increase your response rate, increase the fill rate for your organizations if you kind of switch that mindset.
absolutely. I mean, just going into it being curious, letting them know that like I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to understand who you are and also how I can help. I always at least the attempt to leave every conversation providing some tip or trick, especially if they're an active job seeker. I'll say, hey, where are you at in your current process? Well, here's some tips that I recommend. Whether my opportunity turns into something or not. Here's how you can, land an opportunity based on what I've seen, or if I've sat in interviews before, whatever advice I can give. But just, I think showing up in the outreach, not selling, not coming off as a pitch, is makes people say, I'll have a conversation. But then I also think the fact that I built somewhat of a community on LinkedIn, that's helped as well because it makes my profile seem trusted and credible, and to where they're like, I'll at least have a conversation with Heather because she seems like someone getting worth connected to.
Love it. $1 million question. At the end of the process, somebody gets an offer. The negotiation happens within a candidate and a recruiter. Based on the documentation that you have, based on all the information and data that you've compiled over the course of the first initial outreach to the final offer stage, what negotiation tactics have you found most effective in securing that top talent? And what are some maybe barriers that you have to overcome, but you use data or prior documentation to help out with that information for the negotiation skills?
Yeah, it's, as an agency recruiter, we have a different type of responsibility within this. And so I if I've hired for I'm very upfront about the partnership and whether I've hired with that client before with the candidate, so they understand what I know and what I don't know, because I think that's important. In them feeling confident in how I represent them, and us being able to understand what we're able to do in the long run. So, an example being, if I've not hired with a client before, and we're at the negotiation stage, and then the candidate will ask me, if you think I negotiate, do you think that that'll create some negativity? I've never hired for this client before. I don't know if that resistance will be there. I'll advise you what I think is the best approach, and we can take that and see what happens. But it's up to them at the end of the day, because I'm representing them, what they're most confident with, to take that action. So that way I let them make the decision versus me pushing them to a decision. And then they feel like they should have taken ownership. So I'll always make sure that they feel in ownership of whatever decision we move forward with. If it's a client I've hired with before, I already understand how they go about that process. So it's there's no secret to how they're going to do the back and forth. So I can advise accordingly based on what I already know, to make sure I advocate well for both my client and my candidate, so that both feel like they're getting a win out of the outcome. And so that changes based on what that conversation is, but that's typically how I approach it.
Awesome. What I had success with in my career is having that negotiation process start in the initial first couple conversations and really have that conversation of, hey, what are you looking for in a job, in a career, in a culture, in compensation on the front end? And if they say, hey, they're way over the comp, just let them know, be like, hey, like, be upfront. This is where
Yes.
we're at, and
Yep.
I probably can't help you, but I'll keep you in mind in for future roles. Or a lot of the misconception is when a recruiter asks that, they don't want to give them a dollar amount ever, right? You get pushed back of, I'm not saying how much I'm making of what I'm looking for, what's your expectations, whatever. But letting them know, like, hey, I'm here for you. I want to get you the most money possible. Obviously, there's a budget that they have for this role. So I just wanted to make sure that we're aligned in that. So when that time does come, and they offer it to you, I want to know 100% if I get you this number, you'll accept, based on the other qualifications and other factors that you're looking for. And then have them continue every time you talk to them, repeat that conversation of saying, are you sure? Are you still looking for this? Yep, that's what I'm looking for. Perfect. So then that final stage of, hey, I know that we talked 5, 6 times throughout the process. You told me this is what you're looking for. Guess what? I got it for you. So it helps with the, oh, actually, I'm looking for this now. Well, if they do that, you can say, well, based on my conversations that I have over you with the month and a half, what has changed? Because maybe there has some change, and then you kind of pivot. But if you don't have a reason why, it's hard to go
Mhm.
back to the client or your business of saying, hey, he wants more money, she wants more money. But understanding, having those conversations, have them speak out loud has really helped me of documentation, because
Mhm.
you're going to get them as most money possible. But if they actually say it, then it reassures them, yes, if I get this, I'll accept. If I get this, I'll accept.
Well, and two, as an advisor, which is what we are in that moment. I also, I've been doing tech recruiting, I'd say, for a long time. I don't know, 5 years. I've done a lot of it for a lot of clients. So I've not done tech recruiting for one company only. I've seen what hiring looks like for a variety of clients, and so I'm very familiar with what the industry typically pays based on years of experience, level of responsibilities, and then how the skills you have align with that particular role. All those go into how your compensation comes out. And so I will advise, if we have a crossroad where, let's say, their years of experience don't equate to the compensation that they're requesting, we'll need to dive into a little bit more weeds of level of responsibilities for me to make it make sense for me to be able to advocate for them that this is what they need, and that I know the client would be interested even at that rate. And so there's so much involved in all that. But yes, early discussion is my number one. If their request is above what I think the client will come in at, especially if it's a client I've hired for, I'll say, hey, look, I'll submit you at what you're asking, because I am in no way a meter reader of what value exchange is. I was like, but I need to know, from me having hired before for this client, they typically fall in this range for your years of experience and what you're bringing in. And this is that part is actually, when I say in the beginning, it's at the end of my conversation, because at this point I've already pulled all the qualifications out and how it aligns to the role. So I'm better able to advise about the compensation at the end. And I'll say, they may come back at this range. Would you accept that? And if they go, yeah, I'd consider that, go, okay, we'll submit you at what you're asking, see what they say. But if you're willing to take what I think that they'll come back in at, then I think we're in a good spot. And that's kind of how I approach it. So
It's you're an advocate for the candidate, and you're wanting the best for them in the confined nature of this is what the client or the business is willing to do. And if you have the backing from the candidates, they're going to come back to you. And just being honest is the most important thing, of like, hey, I'll try to get you. They might come back, say no, but then it's giving them, here's the data, here's the information on the situation. You got to make the decision if it's the best fit for you or not, and then move on. And I feel like candidates really appreciate that. The hesitation of having those conversations early on is, I'm going to miss an opportunity to place this candidate. But in reality, they're going to come back to you because you were honest upfront and got them what they wanted, and really be an advocate for them.
well, and other thing I want to point out that you had brought up is candidates maybe not feeling confident to share that information up front.
Mhm.
I let them know, like, I have met recruiters who I have seen, when you give them a low number, they just want the win. They go for the win. They don't say you can get more. They know that you're an agency. They know that if they submit you to, especially if they're competing against competitors, other firms, if they submit you at this low range, but you have great talent, that the client's gonna go with you because you're a lower cost to them.
For
And
sure.
so, I let them know up front, if they have that hesitancy, I've often found it's because they've had that experience where they've had an experience where they didn't feel confident, or that maybe a recruiter didn't do right by them. So I let them know up front, like, hey, I know these things exist. That's not what we're doing here. Actually, the number one thing I say when I come across someone who has hesitancy with me is, when I took this role at the company I'm at, and any company I work for, especially on the agency side, is I will not compromise my integrity for a win. So don't ask of me to do it, because I won't. And so just even leading with that lets them know they feel safe, they feel confident and comfortable, and that we're going to be able to move forward, and I'm going to be a good advocate for them.
Love it. Any last minute words of advice to the audience as we wrap up? And what I'll do is I'm going to throw in a YouTube link. If you loved our conversation just now, Heather was on the Speakeasy podcast. So make sure you get a listen there. She dives in a lot of different insights on tech recruiting. Share that, get her name out there, because she's making an impact within the community that is going to be felt for generations to come. So make sure you take a listen. But Heather, any questions, any last minute word of advice to give us?
Yeah. My last minute advice, I guess, is just always be asking questions, always be diving into things. If you don't know something, be honest about it, so that way you can know. And so that's how I've taken my career in the path that I have, is because I've never been scared to admit when I don't know something and when I need to be educated on something, and that's allowed me to become skilled in what it is that I do. So yeah, always be learning, always be curious, and always be asking questions.
Love it. Awesome. As we wrap up today, I want to say thank you so much for Heather giving some wisdom to the recruiting community. Jump into the recruiting community and hire easy. Start connecting with individuals. Jump into some of the things that we're doing here. And we will see you again for one more session. I believe there's 2 more sessions for this 8 Habits of Recruiter. And we'll see you guys all next Tuesday. Thanks again. I really
Appreciate you,
appreciate
Dan.
it.
Yeah. Have a
You
great
guys.
day, everyone. Have a blessed one.